Recording in progress. All right, are we ready? I think we're finally ready. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Draconic Dishes, How to Feed Your Inner Dragon. I'm Kiara Ember, your local... Hello, everyone. Welcome to Draconic Dishes, How to Feed Your Inner Dragon. I'm Kiara Ember, your local food and coffee-obsessed dragon. So today we're going to be going through food prep, some draconic dishes that can, help feed your identity, and a few demos to keep you excited about cooking. So first of all, I just want to give you a content warning. This is a panel about food, and it includes references to and images of raw meat, cooked game, and other animal products throughout. So if this makes you uncomfortable, I absolutely will not feel bad if you want to leave now or at any point in the panel. Okay, so moving on a little bit, quick intro about myself. Like I said, you can call me Kiara Ember, Kiara K. I'm also over on Tumblr and a number of other places as Obligatory Coffee, and I'm also the owner and creator of BeyondHumanity.net. I'm a Western Dragon Otherkin or Dragonkin, Theriomyth, and also I'm Andalite, which is a blue alien from the I'm also an Andalite hearted, and cheetah and domestic cat hearted. Andalites are these crazy blue aliens from the Animorph series. And I've been around for a while. I've been present in the online community since around 2009, although I wasn't really active until, say 2014. Also, some background on my food experience. I've worked as a chef or in general food service for around 7 years on and off. That's not my main career goal, but it pays better than what I've been doing. So, I've also been interested in food. Cooking and baking are some of my favorite hobbies in my limited free time. And I love unusual foods and unique recipes, especially those involving wild game, weird meats, or no waste recipes. So, using all the food scraps that you have around the house. As far as my favorite identity related dishes, I love rare meat, steak, roasted chicken, liver, venison, etc. Over here on the right, this is something I'm really proud of. It's an entire deer leg that I roasted. It was delicious. Also, weirdly enough, grapefruit really gets me going as far as my draconic urges go regarding food. And really, my cravings are just kin type focused. My hearted identities don't really have any cravings associated with them, weirdly enough. Okay, another disclaimer. Everything I'm presenting here follows U.S. food safety guidelines, and I've been food safety certified in the past through my past food service work, but I'm not a professional chef. I've never been to professional culinary school. So please consult professional resources if you're concerned about food safety or unusual ingredients, and I'll add some links to the presentation at the end and in the chat. Also, this is all US centric, so your home country may have some different food guidelines, so just be aware of that. Okay, let's get started. So a quick overview. Okay, let's get started with the fun stuff. So a quick overview of what we'll be going through. Identity through food, some food and kitchen safety, maybe a little bit boring stuff, some cooking basics, safe alternatives to common draconic food requests, some demos and recipes, then a few resources that I found really fun and helpful, and some time for question and answers at the end. Okay, so first of all, why food? Why focusing, why should we focus on food as a way to feed our identities, pun intended? Well, everybody eats, or I certainly hope they are. It's also cultural. We, at least as humans, a lot of culture sharing happens through food. Also, as far as identity goes, many of us have cultural backgrounds associated with our identities. So, we can share our identities through food as well. There's also a ton of options. Humans and any other creature, dragons included, have all kinds of food options we can consume. Everybody has their preferences too, so you can really tailor things to how you really like it. Also, in many cases, not always, food is usually cheaper than gear. So you could shell out $100 on an awesome chainmail tail, or you can spend $10 or $15 at the grocery store and make yourself a nice steak. And finally, it's a really good skill to practice. So knowing how to cook things in a manner that's safe and also delicious is really, really helpful for mental well-being and from a safety aspect too. So making sure you're not getting food poisoning or poisoning all of your friends. So speaking of food safety, let's go through that a little bit. I know this is boring, but it's really important. Food safety. Well, at least getting sick from food, it's not super common, but it can, definitely throw a wrench in your plans, or in some cases can actually make you really sick. And people have died from, getting food poisoning. Not that that's common, like I mentioned, but it's always good to keep in mind. Okay, so 4 steps to food safety. Clean, separate, cook, and chill. I'll go through these steps. First of all, cleaning. Make sure you're washing your hands before cooking. Some people keep their hands pretty clean. I generally do. Some people don't, but you got dirt under your fingernails, or you've been cleaning the cat box or what have you. You don't want that contaminating your food. Also, washing your fruits and vegetables before eating them or cooking with them. This removes dirt, pesticides, other contaminants. I'm sure we've all bitten down and on some like a salad and gotten a crunchy bit. That's never fun. Pretty gross. And also at least with the scale of agricultural farming we have today, a lot of places use pesticides and other things that we don't necessarily want to be eating. And then finally, make sure your food preparation area is wiped down of dirt, old food, pet hair, etc. Just keeping those things out of your dishes. Step 2, separate. So this is a really big one. Don't mix raw and cooked food unless it's meant to be mixed together. So if you're making a steak salad, obviously your cooked steak can go on top of your raw lettuce. But if you have raw meat juices, especially things like chicken, poultry, and those are getting, those are touching raw vegetables or cooked meats, this is called cross-contamination. This can get you really sick. So, like I mentioned with chicken, meats, other fruits and vegetables too are not safe to eat raw in some cases. So letting those juices touches not in your best interest as far as getting sick. Also, make sure you're using separate cutting boards, knives, and bowls for raw and cooked foods. So maybe these foods aren't touching each other directly, but if you're using the same knife to chop cooked chicken or chop raw chicken, and then you're using it to chop lettuce or some sort of cooked meat, those juices are still intermingling, and that's that can lead to contamination as well. And wipe down surfaces between preparing raw and cooked ingredients. Again, that's just cross-contamination. This also goes for things like peanut allergies or any other allergies you might have. If you're using a knife to chop peanuts and then you're using it to chop something else, whatever that other thing is now contaminated with peanuts too. So just be cognizant of that. Okay, cooking. Make sure you're cooking risky foods. So I've been mentioning chicken a lot. This is a really a high risk food when it's raw. There are other meats as well, that like pork, that can contain a lot of bacteria like E. coli or salmonella. Make sure you're cooking these foods thoroughly, and proper cooking temperatures will kill those nasty bacteria that can get you really, really sick. Great kitchen tool to help with this is a kitchen thermometer, and they're usually pretty cheap. Just make sure that you're inserting thermometers into the thickest part of the food, because if it's poking out the other side or you're measuring a really thin part, it's not actually measuring accurately where you need to be measuring to make sure it's cooked. And finally, if you like raw or very rare meat like I do, let a professional chef deal with it. Obviously I can't come into your kitchen and yell at you like, hey, don't eat that meat. But make sure that you're just being aware of the risks that you're taking if you are, consuming raw or very, very rare meat. All right. And last but not least, chill. And this doesn't have to do with relaxing, although it is good to stay chill in the kitchen. Make sure you're refrigerating things. Basically, keeping food cold helps slow bacterial growth. So when you cook things, that kills the bacteria. But once they cool down, there's a zone where things get warm, or make sure you're refrigerating things. So whether it's cooked or raw, you want to make sure that you're keeping food cold that needs to be cold, and keeping food cold helps slow bacterial growth. So this is why we have refrigerators, right? Also, a big thing that I see people miss is make sure you're thawing frozen food in the refrigerator, not on the counter. If you're leaving a steak out or what have you overnight just to thaw, that can introduce allow a lot of bacteria to grow. And if you're not cooking it thoroughly, then you can get really sick. Most home cooked foods should be stored in the refrigerator. So if you're cooking rice or meat or pasta or whatever, beans, that should all go in the refrigerator. Once you're done, don't leave it out on the counter. But there are some baked goods like cake, bread, or brownies, things people generally do leave on the counter. That's totally fine. And a few other things before we get going. Just general food safety. Make sure you're tossing leftovers. If they're approximately more than a week old, you can always do the smell test, but if you're unsure, just get rid of them. I've definitely gotten sick off of leftovers. Check your heat ratings on cookware. I've definitely melted things in the microwave before or in the oven, and that's never fun. Contaminates your food. It ruins your favorite bowl. So just make sure that you're checking things to make sure they say oven safe or microwave safe, because you don't want a messy melted plastic cleanup. And when in doubt, just use something else. And this also applies to things like spatulas. I've definitely melted spatulas before. It's not great when your food is contaminated with plastic. Finally, this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but sharp knives equals safe hands. Dull knives actually cause more injuries than sharp ones, because essentially what happens is the knives can't grip the food or slice into the food easily that you're cutting, and they'll actually slip off and go into your finger, which is really not fun. And I've also had that happen to me when I sort of started in the food service business. And take it slow. Chopping and slicing isn't a race. I know it's fun to make it look like you know what you're doing, but it's not worth it. We love our fingers here. Okay, so let's move on to actual food instead of talking about food safety. So some things that, well, this is still food safety related, but anyway, I digress. Some things that are unsafe to eat raw. Raw meat and fish, unless properly sourced and prepared. As I mentioned, let a professional chef do this part. I know it's really, really, really hard as a dragon to sit there and look at least for me, and many folks I've talked to, it's really hard to sit there and look at a raw hunk of red meat and not eat it. But unless you know where this piece of meat is from, and you know that it's been prepared in a way that's safe to eat, I would say definitely don't try to eat it. Again, I can't come into your kitchen and tell you what to do, but if you want to stay safe, I'd avoid it. Also eggs, especially in the United States, we're really bad here at keeping eggs contaminant free. So E. coli and Salmonella especially are big concerns with eggs. Although flour, actually, raw flour, just the stuff that you scoop out of a bag of wheat flour, that actually can be contaminated with, well, that actually can be a real concern too with foodborne contaminants. So if you're going to be baking some brownies or whatever, okay, sure, you should be avoiding the raw eggs, but make sure you're also not eating raw flour. Don't lick the bowl. I know, again, I can't come into your kitchen and tell you what not to do, but just be aware. Okay, so we've gone over things humans shouldn't eat raw, and there are plenty of things humans shouldn't eat at all, but how do you cope when you still want to eat them? I mean, I know as a dragon, I want to be eating bones and organ meat and just like raw things. I would love to just like take a bite out of a whole chicken, maybe with the feathers off. But how do you cope when you still want to eat these things, but your human body can't deal with this? Okay, so let's go through some common draconic food requests. So raw meat and eggs, some safe alternatives. Just everything here with an asterisk. I suggest that you let a professional prepare this for you. But a really great alternative to just straight up raw steak is steak tartare. And this is, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically ground red meat, usually beef or bison. And it's salted, it's seasoned nicely. And a lot of times they'll crack a raw egg on top of it, usually just the yolk. It's absolutely delicious. It's completely raw, and it is generally safe for people to consume because it's prepared by a professional chef. There's also black and blue steak. So this is when you go to a restaurant and you order your steak. Extremely rare. Essentially, some folks call it that it's still mooing, or they say it's still mooing. But it's essentially cooked on the outside. So the outside of the steak is the thing that would be potentially contaminated with foodborne pathogens. And the inside is still raw. So the inside part is still safe to eat, even though it's raw, but it hasn't been exposed to the air until you cut into it. Carpaccio, thinly sliced raw beef or other meat. This is really delicious. It doesn't have that necessarily raw taste or texture, but it's still technically raw, quite good. Or irradiated eggs. This sounds kind of scary, radiation. But basically what it does is it just kills the pathogens that might be in the eggs. And you can safely eat them raw. Moving on to fish. I know a lot of us are fish-eating dragons. Sashimi, I know we've all heard of this. Oh my goodness. Raw salmon, raw tuna, so good. Can't say no to that. But let a professional chef prepare this for you. Basically what they do is they freeze it to a really, really low temperature, which our freezers at home generally cannot do. And this kills any potential parasites or pathogens in it. Then they thaw it, and then you can serve it and eat it safely. Also, black and blue tuna, kind of like the steak I was talking about. It's a tuna that has been seared on the outside very briefly, so it kills anything that may be on the outside of the tuna, and then the inside is safe to eat. Also, this isn't necessarily, it's not going to give you the same feeling as eating a raw fish, but dried fish. If you like eating little minnows or small fish, if that's something that maybe you ate or feel like you should be eating as a dragon, these are great. Honestly, I love these. You can get them at Asian food stores. They're typically little anchovies or sardines, and they're usually quite salty, but it's literally like these little tiny whole fish. So good. And if you're looking for something a little bit bigger or a little bit less, dried, canned sardines, canned salmon, anything like that, excellent. Okay, so bones, I know this isn't as common, I don't think, in the Draconic communities, but some folks I've heard want to eat bones. So this one's a little bit harder. It's hard to actually just, eat a bone as a human, or at least with a human body. So some alternatives that I've come up with or seen other people suggest is candied chalk. It's crunchy, it's white, kind of like a bone. Meringues in the shape of bone, so at least you're getting the crunch and that general shape. Those are actually really fun to make. They're a little bit tough, but they're made with whipped egg white and sugar. Quite delicious. Also good for Halloween. There's also hone senbei, which is a Japanese dish of deep fried fish bones. So basically what you do is you bread and deep fry fish skeleton, and because it's deep fried, the bones become crunchy and actually edible, so you're not stabbing yourself in the throat. With fish bones, you can actually crunch them down. Quite delicious. And finally, while you're not actually eating the bones themselves, roasted marrow bones sort of give you a similar vibe to eating a bone, because you're actually interacting with the bone, you're eating what's inside. And if you haven't had it, marrow is so good. Okay, rocks and gems. I know there's some gem eaters out there. Rocks and gems are really fun. Obviously we can't go around eating rocks because that's not good for our digestive system, unfortunately, but there are a lot of really cool alternatives. Hard candy gems or rock candy, you can get those at stores, or you can learn how to make them, which spoiler alert, we might learn today. Really, really cool. You can get them all in all different kinds of colors and shapes and sizes. Really fun stuff. Chocolate rocks. I got some a few years ago that actually looked like rocks. One of my friends came up to me and she said, "Hey, I found this rock." And then she took a bite out of it, and I thought my brain was going to explode. It took me a while to figure out it was actually chocolate. I was like, what? So there's some really, really great alternatives out there if you're just into eating just rocks, not necessarily gems, just things that look like rocks. Also, if you're going a little bit on the healthier side, pomegranate seeds. They're these beautiful red crystals, and they are absolutely delicious. So if you're willing to put in the time to break open a pomegranate, or if your local grocery store sells them already processed, pomegranate seeds are absolutely great. So I've been talking about all of these different ingredients and mentioned, a while back, organ meat, sashimi, all these different things. So where do you actually find these? A lot of these can be found in your grocery store. If you're looking for steak or fish, those will be typically in your local grocery store, whether it's a chain or a family store. But if you're looking for things that are a little bit more uncommon, your local butcher is your best friend. They can, at least if they don't have it, they can tell you where to get it. They typically have a good idea of where to find things in the area. You can also get a lot of organ meats from them that you might not be able to get elsewhere. So liver, things like heart, lungs, oh my goodness, all things like that. This is not something I'm necessarily into, but some folks will cook with blood. So pig's blood or beef blood. Those are things you can also get at a butcher. Farmers markets are really good places to get meat like goat and lamb. It's also supporting your local farmers, so definitely not a bad thing. Also, some other ingredients, I mentioned those dried fish that you can get at your local Asian food store. That's a great place to find things like that. And you can also find bulk items and rice and noodles here. Spices can also be cheaper, so definitely check out your international food store. They also have a lot of really good candy. Finally, specialty and health food stores have some interesting things as well. And when in doubt, go online. So if it's something that can be transported, it's shelf stable like cans or dried food, you may be able to find stuff online as well. Okay. I promise we're getting to the demos soon. So let's go through some food prep first. We want to make sure that if you do decide to make any of these recipes, or just in general, you're not familiar with food prep, let's walk you through how to do this first. So first of all, how to follow a recipe. Generally, if your recipe is laid out in the way that it should be, the ingredients are listed in the order of use. And a really, really good tip to make sure you're actually preparing things in the way that they're supposed to be prepared. Prep ingredients before you start cooking. It never fails. It takes me way longer to chop something or process something than I expect it to. And by the time I'm done with it, something's burning, or things have overcooked, or the things aren't the right consistency as they should be. So make sure you're prepping things in advance, and make sure that you're using the right measurements. It's always good to keep an eye on that. Also, this is my family chili recipe if anybody wants to learn how to make the Ember chili recipe. Another thing, this sort of goes along with the preparation before you're actually cooking. Make sure you preheat your oven if a recipe calls for it. That's really important, especially with things like bread or cooking meat. If you don't preheat your oven, then you're not going to have the proper cooking time. You're not going to have the proper cooking temperature, so things will be either undercooked, or it can potentially, as it's heating up, that burner's going really high, trying to heat up the oven, and you might actually end up burning the outside of your food and not cooking the inside. Just generally not a good situation. So make sure you're preheating your oven. And I kind of alluded to this before, but make sure you're measuring things correctly. Each ingredient should be listed with a measurement. Make sure you're not confusing tablespoons and teaspoons. I've definitely put a whole tablespoon of salt in something before instead of a teaspoon. That is not good. That is not good. Also, a dash or a pinch implies a small amount of an ingredient. So if it just says a pinch of sugar, like it says here in this chili recipe, that's just a little, sprinkling of sugar. All right, and a couple more things. Just read your recipe before you begin, there's always, some recipes get pretty complicated and it seems like it might be easy. And then you read through it and you're like, oh, shoot, I don't have that kind of equipment, or, I don't have time to do this, or this actually, it says it takes an hour to prepare, but it has to sit in the refrigerator for, 12 hours. Just make sure you know what you're getting into. I already got into this, but make sure you know your measurements. Also, a kitchen scale is a lifesaver. If you're measuring things for baking, especially, that can be really helpful. And practice makes perfect. Don't get discouraged if your dish doesn't look like the photograph, because we all know things turn out poorly sometimes. Okay, let's get into the demos. So the first one is seafood foil packets. This one is pretty easy, although it does deal with this one is pretty easy, although it does have a lot of moving parts. So I've given it a rating of 3 out of 5 of difficulty. And this was actually somebody asked me to do a seafood recipe, so this is the one. It's a simple but complete meal when served with pasta or rice. And the original recipe actually does include chicken, but we'll get to chicken later. So I figured I'd just do a seafood recipe here. This is great for ocean dwelling or coastal dragons. If you feel like you eat fish or should be eating fish, this is a great one for you. And this is just adapted from a Japanese cookbook that I have in my collection. Okay, so equipment that you'll need. If you look over on the right, that's an image of the recipe of building our little foil packets. But you'll need a cookie sheet, aluminum foil, small saucepan or pot, a slotted spoon, a chef's knife, which is that big slicing knife you typically imagine when you think of chefs in the kitchen, a cutting board, and some measuring spoons. And this is the recipe here. Basically, I've used cod, some raw shrimp. In the original recipe, the shrimp, it was a half a pound of shrimp and a half pound of chicken. But here we're just using seafood. Mushrooms, butter, lemon, sake, which is a Japanese rice wine. If you don't have rice wine, you can use a little bit of rice vinegar, or just omit it. The lemon will do what you need it to do. Salt and then green onion, and make sure again you're preheating your oven. I will add the recipes to the chat and provide these later. So if you want to come back and read through it, you don't have to worry about speed reading it here. So let's get going. So basically, got to slice the mushrooms. We'll do all of our vegetable prep first. These are just slicing in fairly thick slices and slicing those green onions. I've got water that it's working on getting boiled over there in that little pot, and we'll slice some lemons. I didn't use all the lemon because it actually ended up being a lot. And then we also have our shrimp, our fish, our butter, and our sake. So here we're going to butter the aluminum foil just to make sure nothing sticks to the bottom, and arrange everything so we can get to each foil packet later. Oh, looks like things are boiling. So we're going to parboil the shrimp. So very briefly cook the shrimp just so it's a little bit pink. Oh, looks like it's done. So we're going to drain those, and we'll actually cool them down with some cold water. You can't see it, but I have the sink going with some cold water. What's really great with the shrimp, you can actually, if you have the peels, if you've had to peel your shrimp, you can make shrimp stock out of the peels. It's great for, shrimp soup or, whatever. So here we're just putting the fish in each foil packet. We're dividing. Oh no, it's over. It's boiling. Make sure you're keeping an eye on what's boiling. This is see, we all make mistakes, but anyway. So we're dividing all the shrimp that we cooled down evenly between packets, and then we'll start topping all of these with those vegetables that we sliced earlier. And again, we're just dividing everything evenly. And meanwhile, the oven is already preheating. So once we put the butter on and drizzle some sake over, we're going to put all the foil packets together and we're going to bake them very briefly. Ta-da! Meanwhile, the shrimp stock that boiled over earlier, we'll take care of that. Also, always good to clean up while you have some extra time. Makes things clean up easier later. All right, let's take care of those shrimp. I could have just drained them, but this is more cinematic. So you can get rid of the shrimp peels. We don't really need them for anything else. They're not. I guess they are technically edible, but they're not good to eat. Okay, so our fish packet should be done. Let's pull them out of the oven and check these out. Oh my goodness, look at that. So these did turn out a little bit watery, just because we're not using the chicken. So I poured it over rice, and absolutely delicious. Very easy, very delicious, complete meal. Okay, so let's move on to our second demo. I mentioned chicken. So this one, this is really, really easy. And I was hoping to do a full roasted chicken. Unfortunately, right now, if any of you have been paying attention, avian influenza is a really big deal right now. So there have been a lot of chicken deaths across the United States, North America, and I believe actually across the world. So chicken is, or at least whole chickens, are really expensive and harder to come by. So we're just using some chicken thighs here. But regardless, this is a super easy recipe. So I've given it a 2 out of 5 of difficulty, and this is it would have been a 1 out of 5, but we are technically dealing with raw chicken. So, just got to make sure you're cognizant of what's touching what. So that up the difficulty rating. Also, kind of like we did with those shrimp peels, chicken bones can be boiled to make chicken stock. Absolutely delicious if you like chicken noodle soup, or whatever kind of soup that has chicken stock in it. Awesome, awesome stuff. Also, if you're not feeling up to cooking your own chicken, rotisserie chicken is a great option. I'm sure many of you have had rotisserie chickens before. However, you'll get a smaller chicken, less bang for your buck, and it's less customizable because they're typically already seasoned with whatever the seasoning that your grocery store or wherever you're getting the chicken from, or whatever they use. Anyway, roasted chicken is great for any dragons who like to eat whole animals, because you can just go for it. You have the bones in there. You can really feel like you're eating an animal carcass if you're into that kind of stuff. And the recipe this is from it's just a recipe I found online. Again, I'll link this in the chat. But this recipe has a whole bunch of other suggestions too that we won't get into in this demo. So I suggest you check it out if you're interested. This is an image of a chicken that I roasted. This is not what the end product will look like today, but you can see nice golden brown, delicious. That's what you can end up with. For equipment, you'll need a cast iron or ceramic Dutch oven. This big black pot here. Or if you have an oven safe dish or pot that is not a Dutch oven, you can use that as well. That works fine. It's nice to have tongs to wring your chicken and sort of shift it around as it cooks. Kitchen thermometer is really important to have to make sure your chicken is cooked. Food safe twine for trussing your chicken, which you tie the ends of the chicken legs together to make sure nothing's falling out of the end of it once you stuff it, if you plan to stuff it with anything. And then a chef's knife and cutting board, for chopping things that are being stuffed into the chicken, and for slicing your chicken once it's done. So again, like I mentioned, we're just using chicken thighs here. They were a lot cheaper than a whole chicken, a lot easier to come by in the current avian influenza situation. And so as a result, I didn't use the lemons because we can't really stuff chicken thighs, at least not like a normal chicken. But for a normal chicken, this is the recipe that I'd be following. Okay, so we're just using 2 chicken thighs here. Make sure you pat them dry so the skin gets nice and dry, and it'll crisp up really well when you're cooking it. And make sure you're seasoning everything really well. Nice salt and pepper, any herbs that you like, garlic, great options. And we'll just arrange it in the pot, and into the oven it goes. Super, super easy. If we were going to be stuffing it, you'd pat the inside of the chicken dry and stuff it with lemons or onions, or stuffing if you're doing sort of a Thanksgiving style chicken. So this does cook for a while, and Obviously things are sped up here. We'll flip our chicken thighs over. You wouldn't do this with a normal chicken, but you know, make sure that it's cooked properly around. And now we're checking to make sure it's done. What do you know? That was super fast. And nice golden brown, delicious. You know, that darker area is some of that skeleton and some of the like organ meats associated with it. Those are my favorite parts. I know some people don't like them, but really, really super, you know, super easy, super great, super delicious. Okay, so third demo, let's move into something a little bit sweeter. Lava cakes. I mean, we're dragons, right? We like fire, we like lava. Well, some of us. So I figured dark chocolate lava cakes would be a really good option here. And this, I gave this 3 out of 5 difficulty rating because it is baking things. You have to be really careful about how long you bake these. Otherwise, they won't be lava cakes anymore. They'll just be muffins. So keeping an eye on timing is the hard part here. Okay, so this recipe uses a muffin tin, but you may get better results with larger ramekins. There are a lot of recipes out there that actually call for those larger dishes just because the outside can cook fully, and then the inside, even though it is cooked, it won't be as, you know, it'll be that lava inside. It's just that barely cooked batter. So it's a little bit easier to do and a little bit less finicky. But I figured a lot more of us have muffin tins than, you know, baking ramekins. So this is hopefully a little bit more accessible. This is just a basic recipe, but feel free to customize with flavorings, you know, cinnamon, vanilla, espresso powder, that's a great one, or even cayenne pepper if you want a little bit of a kick. And this is perfect for those of us who love fire and have a sweet tooth. So you'll need a muffin tin or those baking ramekins I mentioned, a sifter, medium bowls, and at least one that's microwave safe, rubber scraper, chef's knife and cutting board for, you know, chopping some of the chocolate, and cooking spray for your ramekins or your muffin tin. So this does have a number of ingredients. I won't go through them there, but again, make sure you're preheating your oven and you know, you'll make sure you're preheating your oven. Okay, so right here, I've sprayed my muffin tin and you dust it with cocoa. I'm not really sure how helpful this is, but that just makes sure, you know, things aren't sticking. Okay, so here I've used baking chocolate. You can, I guess you can technically use chocolate chips, but they have stabilizers in them. So they don't tend to make the ooey gooey lava inside the lava cakes as good. So baking chocolate, you can get it at any grocery store. And here, this is a blend of unsweetened and semi-sweet chocolate, but you can use whatever you want, white chocolate, dark chocolate, lots of options out there. Okay, so now we're breaking our butter up into chunks, and we'll take the chocolate and the butter mixture and we'll microwave that and get it nice and gooey, melted, and then we'll incorporate the flour and the sugar, which we're mixing here. This is powdered sugar, and this has been pre-sifted just to get the lumps out. I suggest you do this. You don't have to, but here we have 4 eggs, 4 whole eggs, and then we have 4 egg yolks. So you actually have to separate the egg yolk from the egg white. You can do that just by using the shells. It's a little bit finicky, or you can actually get tools. There's little silicone sucker things that'll suck out the egg yolks for you. And for the egg whites, you can keep those, use them for baking, use them for you know, egg white omelets or what have you. Okay, so we have our melted chocolate and our butter. Got to make sure there's no lumps. You can see some little butter lumps in there still. There we go. And probably should have added the egg first, but doesn't really matter. It turned out fine. Just make sure you're mixing things. Because this does contain some flour, we don't want to mix it too much. You know, if you think about bread, making bread when you knead it, that gets the gluten going. We don't want that in this situation. We want our cakes to be nice and fluffy and not chewy and dense. Okay, so we'll divide these evenly between our 12 little muffin tins. And then we'll bake them for about 8 minutes. I think I actually overcooked these a little bit. My oven tends to run a little bit hot, so The recipe does say 8 to 10 minutes, but you might check them after maybe 6 or so minutes just to make sure that you're not you don't have hockey pucks at the end. So we need to wait a little bit for these to cool, about a minute or two, and then you can pull them out. Make sure you're not getting them stuck in there, and then just invert them on a plate and have a delicious lava cake. You can put some ice cream with them or fruit, whatever. Nice and ooey gooey in the middle. So chocolate lava, everyone. Okay, I know. So I was originally only going to do 3 demos, but the chicken demo ended up being pretty short because we didn't use a whole chicken. So I figured I'd add in a last demo, candy crystals, like I kind of alluded to earlier. This was actually a demo that I did in 2021 for OtherCon, but it turned out so beautifully, and it's sort of a fun. It's a little bit difficult, but sort of a fun recipe. So I figured I'd add it. Okay, so I gave this one a 5 out of 5, mostly because this deals with cooking really, really hot sugar. Hot sugar is a heck of an ingredient to work with. If you get it on yourself, it will burn you extremely badly. So be very, very careful with this stuff. But it turns, if you do it right, it turns out delicious and amazing. It also requires a candy thermometer, which I'll explain in a bit. Okay, so these things are gorgeous. Like, I can't get over how beautiful these things are. It was actually really hard for me to want to eat them because I just wanted to keep them around and look at them, but it's candy, so I did get around to eating them. For those of you who are gem eaters, these are perfect. And you can add whatever flavoring and colors you prefer. Here, I added sort of a blue and a black, so it kind of turned out purple and blue. But if you want them red, if you want them orange, whatever, that's up to you. And it's, even though you're dealing with a ton of sugar, it's really actually quite an easy cleanup if you soak the dishes. And like I mentioned, watch out for hot syrup. Like, seriously, this stuff hurts. Okay, so one thing that you'll need these silicone molds. You can, the ones I got here are just off of Amazon. But you can get all different kinds of molds in any shape you want, really. Just make sure they're food safe. There are some resin molds that people use to make resin jewelry. Some of those are food safe, but just make sure you know what you're using. And you need liquid and dry measuring cups, measuring spoons, a candy thermometer, which is made especially for making hard candies and caramels. It's this weird glass tube, and it'll say candy thermometer on it when you buy it. A small saucepan and a rubber scraper that is safe for using with heat. It doesn't really require a lot besides sugar, flavoring, and color. You can use, I really highly suggest gel or gel paste food coloring. If you're using just your regular like liquidy food coloring, that can add enough liquid to the mixture that the candy won't set properly. So I'd suggest getting the gel stuff. And just be really, really cognizant of how hot your sugar is getting, because if it gets too hot, then it'll start burning, or it'll start getting a weird kind of caramel color, which isn't as pretty if you're using blues or purples. And if you don't cook it enough, then you get these really soggy, droopy looking crystals. So here we're just mixing in the sugar and the water and the corn syrup, and essentially you just let it boil. So we'll get that going there. And once that starts heating up, we'll stick the candy thermometer, which is that weird tube, and make sure it's not touching the bottom of the pot, because that'll give you a weird reading. It'll say it's a lot hotter than it really is. But definitely keep an eye on it. You can see it's starting to boil. And now we wait. All right, so we're boiling, and in a little bit, we will add some food coloring and food flavoring. Here I've just used vanilla, but you can get all kinds of extracts, lemon, cherry, espresso, chocolate, whatever. There's a lot of stuff out there. Okay, so it's just boiling. Okay, now I'm checking the temperature out. Not quite yet. You can see the consistency is changing a little bit. Okay, she's getting close. And you can see it's getting a lot thicker. Okay, so I've already measured out the color, and just add a really small drop. Get that, so it's a little bit more. And that's the black that actually turned a little bit purple. So it's nice dark, actually kind of gross looking sludge. And then pouring it into some sort of pouring a thing with a little spout. That'll make things a lot easier. You just pour them into your molds. This made a lot of extra syrup, so you can put it in other molds if you want. Basically, you just let it cool, and you can take them all out of the silicone molds. And some of them are a little bit more difficult. You can also use these molds for ice, but this is what it turned out to be. They're absolutely gorgeous, and they're absolutely delicious. You can use it for decorating, wowing your friends, or just eating, whatever you want, but absolutely beautiful. Okay, a few resources that I mentioned before. Foodsafety.gov, this is for US food safety, but has really good guidelines for how to make sure you're keeping safe in the kitchen. There's a really cool thing called Taste Atlas, especially if you feel like your identity is tied to some region of the earth. There are some really cool, or it's basically just this map. You can go around and you can zoom in, you can click on all different kinds of dishes and whatever region you want. So, for instance, here I'm gonna zoom in on Japan at some point. But you can just find all different kinds of local and regional dishes. And a lot of times it'll either give you background or even give you recipes. So, for instance, if you are a Eastern dragon and you really like gyoza or dumplings, you can perhaps find this kind of gyoza, and it'll kind of tell you how to make it and some of the background on it. So just an example. Also, Kin Food. This is honestly one of my favorite tumblers. It has been super dead for a number of years, but the blog is still up. And unfortunately, the tag system doesn't work anymore. But if you put in, you can click, or you can type in, dragon or whatever tag you think you might want to use. There is a list of tags if you explore it. You just add that to the URL, and you can find stuff that's directly you can find stuff that's directly related to dragons, or if you want a chicken dish or whatever, like in here, like Mediakin or Fictionkin. There's all different kinds of recipes, and it's really cool. It's one of the best ultra-human resources I've found for food. And then I put this together a while back, safe meat for carnivorous kin or theriotypes. Basically, it's just a list of recipes, or basically it's just a list of foods and where to get some of them, and some tips, regarding safe eating of unusual meats or unusual products that you might not necessarily find in your grocery store. And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for listening to this. I know it's kind of long and very in-depth in some aspects, especially with the food safety stuff. But if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, either here at the summit or online later if you think of something. And now we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer. I'm happy to take any of your questions, or if you have any requests as far as dishes that I didn't cover that you think might be might help you out with expressing your draconity, or if you just have something you don't know what you want, but you feel like you should be eating something, I can try to help you figure out what you could eat with a non-draconic body in our current states here. So again, thank you very much, and let's start the Q&A.